And this assumption says we're not assuming any dependents, so it would be more, but not much.
But not a whole lot. Okay.
Thank
So the
you.
40,000 figure is fair.
Pretty close.
Fair estimate.
Yeah.
I like your thought. Not contracting out. and just
Only question I have
Okay,
is,
we're a little late, so we're gonna get started right now.
It's like 1.2 or something.
Call the meeting to order.
2011.
If that's the direction you're going, and I can support.
You don't pay much attention.
I'd like to see what.
No, I think it. Hey,
see
we
what the
called the
bill
meeting
looks
to
like,
order.
Call the roll, please.
Yeah.
I'm
Commissioner
actually
Wheelock,
louder than him this time.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Fleece,
He's
Yeah, we
excused.
cannot look.
Max Bauer,
She's out there.
Richardson,
Here.
Stepka, Friend,
Here.
Inman,
Here.
Hooper,
He's excused.
Chairman Thomas.
Here. Okay, first item is public comment. Would you read the rules, please?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. A, any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. B, no person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. One chairperson may at his or her discretion extend the amount of time each person is allowed to speak.
Thank you. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment. Does anybody want to speak now?
No, he said we're fine here.
Either one.
Right here, please, Barb.
Either one.
Picks up better.
My name is Barb Lemcool, and I am the coordinator for the Grand Traverse Community Collaborative. And do you want to know where I live? Do I have to say that? I live in Garfield Township. I always watch the city meetings, and you have to give that whole litany of where you live and what your address is. I don't have to do that. I just wanted to speak for just a minute about the community collaborative. As you recall, when you had your very first meeting, we brought a letter, and I understand it very well, maybe coming up for discussion today. And I just kind of wanted to give you a chance to ask me any questions, if you had any, about collaborative projects and how those projects impact or include departments of the county and all of that sort of thing. So I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to ask me any questions. And HelpLink is opening in 2 weeks. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on that as well.
Barb, can you tell me how many departments with the county partner with the collaborative?
The Commission on Aging, the Health Department, the Police Department. Oh, yeah, all the courts. I didn't bring my list. I'm sure there's others. Yeah, Michigan State Extension.
And that,
And the $5,500 that we're asking for covers dues even if more of the county departments wanted to join. And certainly, many of the departments come and talk to us, and we work with them on projects like the land bank, the nonprofits. You know, we worked with them to get the nonprofits to be able to use some of those properties for nonprofit projects and, you know, maybe halfway houses and things like that. I don't know exactly what all they're doing with them, but we worked with the land bank on that. I'm trying to think of certainly the health clinics that have happened. We actually, with Kit and I wrote the grants for the health clinics. So the collaborative came in and was a part of that as far as the services are concerned. The dental health clinic absolutely is certainly one of the important projects for the collaborative.
Dennis, do we pay any more money out of any of those other department budgets to the collaborative?
No.
This is a county-wide membership that allows all our departments to participate.
Okay, thank you.
I
Is that
have one
okay?
question for Barb.
Okay.
What is your total funding revenue source, and can you break that down for me? You know, like, does everybody kick in that's part of the?
Absolutely. We
Tell
get
me how it
about
works.
$25,000 from membership dues. Many organizations, like the larger organizations, will pay $750 to $1,000 each, like the ISD and the school system, and DHS, they all pay $1,000 each. Other large organizations pay $750, and it goes all the way down to $100 for places like Michael's Place that is very small and has one staff person or two staff people,
So your total budget is how much?
No, the total budget is about $35,000. We get a $10,000 contribution from Community Mental Health as well. And then there is about $8,000 that we can draw down from the state Strong Families, Safe Children Fund, but that is strictly for working with foster care and adoption and juvenile justice kids. So that's very restricted money, and that doesn't go very much into administration.
Well, I find it amazing you can do everything you're doing for a budget of $35,000.
Just
Personally.
about. Well, and that's why we were so concerned about this 5,500, because that would be a huge, huge loss for the collaborative.
Okay.
Okay?
There's a lot of the smaller organizations too who participate, and it's important to remember that they don't have a lot of funding sources like Michael's Place and,
That's right. And they all still seem to find the funding just because it is so important to our community. You know, Sarah's House wouldn't be Sarah's House without the collaboration. Certainly Help Link with Faith Reformed Church and the doctor's office that's opening on December 12th, or October 12th would never have happened without the collaborative. So it's pretty important to the citizens of Grand Traverse County, we feel.
Is that the Human Services Coordinating Council?
It is. We call it the Grand Traverse Community Collaborative.
Okay, because I was looking for that title and I wasn't seeing it, so.
Yeah, we changed it about, well, I don't know, I've had this job 5 years, so.
We just
5
haven't
years.
caught up with you.
Sorry.
All right.
they hold their meetings with us at the third or?
It's the fourth Thursday,
Thursday.
which is this Thursday, actually, at Michigan Works.
There's usually, gosh, like 25, 30 people there,
It's usually more like 40.
is it?
Yeah, or it depends on what time of the year. But certainly this time, everybody's struggling with funding, so, you know, we certainly understand that. It's just that I think a lot of important work happens because of this. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for considering.
Anyone else? Then I'll close public comment and turn it over to the,
Administration. We have several documents that we'd like to pass out to you, and I'd like to take a minute to go over each of these. Wait, this one first. And I won't take a lot of time, but we worked on the things that you asked us to, and I think we have some answers and recommendations for you. This first sheet that we're passing out is simply just, we just redid it so we could show you which positions you directed us to try to find money for. So all we did is we took those couple three that were in the 2 category, we moved them up, and these are the ones that are recommended and the ones that were left, just to clarify it so you could see it. So that's pretty simple. Any questions, everybody understand? Okay. The next one is the letter from Bill Rokas. And in this letter, I'll wait till you get it, and then we can talk about it.
Thank you.
The front page is Bill's letter, and the back page is the analysis that shows since 2000 the fund. But let me start by saying that what Bill is indicating is that for the next 3 years, he's projecting earnings of $1,823,000 a year, and for the previous 3 years, it's been an average of $1,366,000. So almost $450,000 increase in funding. Bill is saying for next year, he believes there's an excess of $900,000 that could be utilized if the board chose to utilize it. And in the bottom, you'll see that he's in agreement with me and with others that have said it, that a good way to address that might be the road commission road bonds or the Lafreniere bonds. And I want to tell you about an interesting conversation I had with him this morning. We're going to investigate, here, simply put, we're getting 0.5% on our investments. We have regularly, we have $9 million in a fund balance. We have millions of dollars in cash that's sitting there. and we can only invest it at 0.5%. Bill came up with what I think is a really creative idea. We don't know that it's legal, but it's creative, and so we're checking it out. But what Bill's saying is, if some of these bonds we have on the Lafreniere building or some of these other buildings are callable, and we have a 5% interest rate, why can't we call them and buy them ourselves? And then use that as our investment, and would be making 5% instead of 0.5%. I never heard it before, but it kind of sounds good. It probably sounds too good to be true. But we're looking into it, and so we're gonna look into that, and that's aside from this. I mean, we invest cash on a regular basis, and he's getting a 0.5% right now on his cash, and so we're looking for more creative ways to bring in more interest, and better pay ourselves than pay some bank. Okay, so we're looking at that, but Bill feels very comfortable, and Dean and I have reviewed this, and we agree that there's that kind of money left. Now, we don't need $900,000 next year, and what Bill and I, he didn't put it in here because he doesn't want to hedge on what's going to happen in 2012, but he has told me, and I think we're both very comfortable that there's going to be more money available, and that second road commission bond issue is not going to be problematic to pay out of this fund. We think there's a possibility that a third one, the final one, can be paid out of this bond too. But we're proposing we look at this on a year-by-year basis. But I think Bill and I think Dean are all three comfortable we can at least get 2 years bonds paid out of this without any problem whatsoever. And that's especially true because, and will probably not require any borrowing, simply because the bonds are due in August. Our crush on funding is in March, when we have to pay the delinquencies to the local units, and we bring in roughly $1 million a month after that, so in paid delinquencies. So if you turn to the second page, the back side of this, if you would, I'm just going to show you, if I can find it. All right, so it's the second line, net income before transfers. And you can see that in 2000, it was $1,113,753, and you can see it's gone down in 2003, 2004. It started going up in 2005, and it's up to the point where this year we're estimating bringing in $1,899,000 in earnings. You know, that's a $750,000, $770,000 in earnings above what we were getting in 2000. So and now our delinquencies are starting to go back down, so there's less that we have to borrow. So Bill is very comfortable with this, and I wanted to give you this analysis. Dean and I concur with it, and so we do believe that's a viable option for you to look at if you choose to. Any questions on that I can answer, or Dean and I can answer?
Dennis, I note that in Bill's letter, he talks about that I take it it's the Lafreniere bonds are callable in September of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
those are the ones that we talked about, Commissioner, to see if there's a possibility of us calling them and us loaning ourselves the money. And what we're talking about here is the Lafreniere bonds are with the building authority, so we want to see if there's a way that we can loan the money to the building authority at the same interest rate that they're paying on the bond issues, and pay those bond issues off and collect that 5% interest, and collect that 5% ourselves. We pay ourselves basically, but instead of paying, Dean even likes this. He's hearing it for the first time, but there may be auditing issues, and we haven't talked to Dean yet.
How much are the bonds on the Lafreniere building?
I can't tell. I don't know. It's well in excess of the $1.5 million that we have in the road commission bonds, but I don't know the number. I can get you that number though.
You're just capturing the revenue you'd be paying somebody else. I mean, the interest that you'd
That's
be
the
paying
idea.
somebody else. So what exactly are the numbers that you would feel comfortable budgeting in for over the next 2-year period?
Well, actually, what I think, and Dean and I have talked about this with Bill, I think that we could do what I talked to you about last night. I think we could take the $300,000 that we're loaning from the fund balance now to pay off the health department building bonds early. Remember, that saves us $25,000 in interest. That's going to short the fund balance by $300,000 in order for us to have $625,000 available for the next year, and then $625,000 available for 2012. We think we can put that back into the fund balance to keep that even. We think we can make the $438,000 road commission payment next year, and we believe we can make the $438,000 road commission payment in 2012. We're feeling pretty optimistic we'll be able to make the final road commission payment out of this fund in 2013, but we want to hold on that and evaluate that in 2012 to see if the money is still, if the fund is still as solvent as it appears to be right now. We actually feel that we're close to having that much money available right now, but, you know, we want to hold on that just to be conservative. So we think we can definitely do 2 years of the road commission bonds and also put the $300,000 back. All three of us are comfortable with that.
And that's it? There's no more, you know, marginal amount?
Not
No,
at this
we think
point.
that's about all, that's about all we
I'm
can
just
do.
asking.
Yeah, no, I think that's all we feel comfortable with at this time.
So assuming that scenario of taking 300 additional out of the fund balance, and I know that you're saying that we could take money to make the payment for the road commission bond payment, and we would have the availability of the health department cash flow for the bond payment. How does that affect the fund balance during this period of time? Does it drop, given our initiative of 625 this year, 625 next year, pulling 300 out for the health building?
And putting it back.
Do
with
you know the time period of
delinquents.
putting that back,
Yeah, it would be next year anytime.
the following year?
No, next year, 2011.
So we could drop something below 18, but maybe around 17 or 16?
We won't be
or-
below 18.
We will not be below 18?
We would put it back before we borrow the $625,000 for 212.
Oh, I see
Before we
what you're
take that,
saying.
that we would not be below 18.
I see what you're saying.
No.
Okay.
It would stay above 18.
All right.
Yeah.
So if I'm calculating this correctly, the 300, the 438 times 3, we're drawing about $1.6 million out of what
Yeah.
Bill is saying.
If
is
we're able to do the
available,
third year.
1.8.
Yep, if we're able to do the third year, which I'll tell you right now, I'm pretty comfortable we're going to be, but we're trying to be very conservative on that, you know. And again, I think the wisdom in this is that it's an expense that terminates. It terminates in 3 years. We're not putting ourselves in a position where we're using it to fund ongoing operations and thereby putting ourselves in some level of reliance that we can't fund when this money runs out. So I think it's a real reasonable approach to this. So, you know, I think it's worth doing.
So are you indicating to us that, you know, if we have a starting balance of $1,075,000 and we need $1,004,000 to retain the first tier, priority ones, then we're going to have to pull most likely $400
I'm going to get to that,
out of the
if I could, I'm going to get to that in 1 minute.
delinquent tax fund?
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, let me just
All right,
go through the
okay.
rest of this.
All right, okay.
That's the thing after this.
All right,
I'll
okay.
have that for you.
I'm always jumping, you know, so
No,
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
But, and maybe I'm going down the same road, but the 300, the 438, and the 438, what that really does is it still keeps the 625 that we
Absolutely.
were talking about yesterday.
Right.
It doesn't increase that.
No, no.
But, and then the 438, what that does is boy, I'm starting to need glasses, I tell you. The, general fund contribution to the capital improvement, that's where we'll have some
You
latitude.
could bump that up, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that some more in just 1 minute. All this is just a summary. I worked with Jason Jones today to relook at the budget at the request of Commissioner Max Bauer. We've identified $18,126 that Jason feels comfortable could be put back, or could be taken out of that budget and put back into help with our fund deficit. The majority of that is the money that was in there for lifeguards that was erroneously left in there. It shouldn't have been, $14,000. He's lowered the gas and oil line item by $1,800, and he's lowered the travel by $1,850. One of the questions Commissioner Max Bauer asked was why we would have such a big travel budget for only 2 employees. The travel budget covers 19 employees. 10 of them or 9 of them are board members, Parks Board members. You'll remember, Commissioner, last year you went to the annual conference in Grand Rapids. That's paid out of this budget.
I
We're
know.
fortunate next year that the conference is in Grand Traverse County.
I was just going to say, it's going to be at the resort.
So we've cut that, he had cut that back in his original budget. But in addition to that, we cover the 2 full-time lifeguards for their certifications, Jason and Kim for their certifications, and other lifeguards that are certified for both advanced life support, for, there are some that are aquatics, exercise aquatics teachers that have certifications. We pay all their certifications whenever they're up for renewal, which are usually 2 or 3 years. So it's quite a bit more than just going to conventions. And so this is what we came up with.
Okay.
You may want to modify it, but there's $1,800 here in savings.
18,000.
18,000.
18,000.
Excuse me.
All right, good.
Well, actually, it's a cut of 57,000, which is an additional 30,000 more than we asked them for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a bit more. All right, this is the summary one.
Thank you.
Dean did the start work on this. Dean's on vacation, as you can see tonight. He's here. He allowed me the flexibility to modify it, and I'd like to walk through this line by line if we could. So basically, this takes us from the very start. You had said you're going to commit the contingency and $625,000 of fund balance, $1,375,000. You were going to put $100,000 back in the 11 contingency and put the $200,000 from the custodial appropriation error that we made back in, giving you $1,075,000. Commissioner Richardson came up with the idea of using the Human Services Fund balance, which brings back $49,502. We're proposing here, you said that it was okay to figure $37,207 of personal property tax as a result of this new thing that we're doing. And we put that in, which equals the cost of the appraiser, the equalization appraiser. The Parks and Recreation savings are in there, which gives you $1,179,835. The Tier 1, Priority 1 positions cost $1,258,757. And in looking at that, we looked at the child care funds, but in order to conservatively protect that fund, we figured we had to use the higher numbers, so these are at the higher numbers. We've added in the Tier 2 priorities that you had, which were $167,000, which means we had a net shortage of $246,335. There's an option here that Dean came up with that I agree with. Basically, this is assuming that if we put the GIS technician back in, and don't get hung up on this because we can do it, I'll show you later, we can do it a different way. We're saying Lori feels comfortable that she's going to be able to bring in another $25,000 in personal property tax that would cover that, along with sale of the ortho imagery product for $10,000. So we think we can fund that GIS position other than using your fund balance. And then what we're suggesting here is using a 1% CPI estimate, which is $211,000. If we do that, we have now funded the positions that you asked us to fund. If you turn it over, I'm taking it that further step. I'm suggesting that we go ahead and do this tax delinquency transfer to pay the bond issue off, and that we set it into the CIP fund, and we reserve $211,107 as the hedge against if the CPI goes down. If the CPI doesn't go down, that's just extra money in your capital fund. Okay, if the CPI does go down, you take a little bit out of it to put into your operations so you don't have a deficit in the operations. And that would still leave you an extra $227,081 that you could leave in the capital fund that you don't need to appropriate now. It builds your capital fund, and as people come back next year and say, I need this, I need that, you'd have a little more money in that fund to help support it. So really, it's what we talked about last night. With the exception of the GIS revenue from personal property tax, what we're saying is make the bond payment on the roads out of the tax delinquent fund. There's money there to cover it. And that frees up the same amount of money, $438,000, in your capital budget, which is where we paid that from. And that's money you have. It's in there. I don't recommend you use it for operation. That's my opinion, because it's a one-time expense. But it gives you a hedge in case that doesn't. Right now, CPI is coming in at 1.6. We're figuring it at 1. But to be conservative, if it comes in at 0.8, you've got extra money in there to cover any deficit. If it comes in at 1.6, you've got more money than you needed. And yet it still leaves that $438,000 back in the capital fund that you can do something else with. Now, whether you use some of that 438,000 for additional operations, or you just keep it in there reserved, again, that's up to you. We didn't really use any of it in this, but we did estimate the 1% CPI number. Questions?
Dennis, the only other thing that I'm asking, I guess I need to know about is, what about the $300 or $300,000 for the health department building? I don't see anything here where we've replaced that money.
No, because that just makes it so that
That'll
you can
just
keep
come out of the tax
625.
delinquent fund
That just comes
separately.
out of the
Yeah,
fund
Bill will
separately.
come here with a budget adjustment during the year with Dean, and they'll ask you to put that back in. All you're going to do is you're going to take the excess cash and move it into fund balance. It's going to raise your fund balance.
In Bill's letter, he's talking about allowing for an additional appropriation of $900,000 in 2011,
Yes.
and the replacing the $300,000 for the health department bond and making the road commission bond payment together is about $738,000.
Yes.
So you're recommending only taking $738,000 instead of $900,000?
Yes, and using the other 100 and some thousand to start building for the road commission bond the following year.
So you would just leave it in the tax delinquent fund?
Leave it in the tax delinquent fund, yeah.
Okay.
Question.
Sure.
Outside of the FTE recommendation, we have like on your supplemental appropriation sheet, we have like 3 no's, fireworks for 6,000, fire education for 88,000, and the coordinating council for 5,500. I'm sorry, there's 4 of them. And the Traverse Bay Economic Development Corp., which is not on this sheet, for 20,000. Would it, I don't know if you've given any forward thought to those, whether that you're recommending just continuation, no, or if the CPI goes above 1%, then we can go back and readdress those appropriations.
I think these are outside of the county regular fund, and I think these are more discretionary in terms of the importance of them to commissioners, and I've made no recommendation on that. I
Okay.
think that's yours to decide.
Okay.
I mean,
But you did take them out of the budget originally?
I did, yes, to try to get down to that, yeah, to make that decision, you know.
And they're still
I
out.
think if you're my answer to your question is, the priority needs to be with county departments and county services.
I agree.
And that's where I think.
No, I agree completely. I was just,
But there's some smaller numbers in this. than
Well,
most side,
having
but-
said that,
yeah,
you know, like
yeah.
the Human Services Coordinating Council, if it allows membership, and it does, to several of our departments, to me, that's $5,500 that's probably well spent.
Right.
I can't, you know, some of these other ones, you know, they were based on either what I was hearing from commissioners or other things. Things like fireworks, to me, I just don't see that as being a priority.
Right.
If you get into next year and you have money in your contingency and you decide fireworks are important, that's a discretionary thing by the commission.
Actually, the Veterans Coalition has decided not to undertake fireworks in
Oh, really?
2011, but they will be
Interesting.
looking at it again
We're
for
$9,000
2012.
short this year,
Oh, really?
Really?
Okay,
Wow.
good to know.
last time I knew.
Chris, that'll
Well, I just wanted
put a
to
crimp in things.
say what I think I'm already hearing from other commissioners is my priority is county services and keeping the sheriff's road deputy, the central records office specialist. I want to have funding in there for the recently vacated assistant prosecuting attorney. If our prosecuting attorney, Mr. Schneider, deems that he needs that position filled again, that's my priority.
Yeah, I think we can address that.
Can we go back to the reinstatement priorities?
Sure.
Sure.
The non-reinstated positions come up to a total of $899,000 plus.
No, actually, he's only not reinstating those.
If you add that and that.
Yeah, but he's reinstating those.
No, they're up here now.
It's about $898,000.
$899,000.
$899,000.
The ones that won't be back.
Right.
How much is the unemployment are we going to be hung for?
Okay. Next.
We're ready.
More
Actually,
paper.
I have one more comment.
Okay, sure.
On the sheet you handed out here tonight, on the recommended for reinstatement, the truancy coordinator, probation officer, and office specialist, all in family court,
Yes.
the total of those three positions, based on your numbers, is $173,000 and some change.
Yes.
But because those are half funded by the state, isn't it true that it only costs half of that much money to reinstate them?
Yeah, but they moved the two.
Dean, why don't you answer that?
That is true, Commissioner Richardson, but when we charge them 100% back to the child care fund, the county has to cover 50% of that. If we would have revenue in the general fund equal to 50% of those three FTEs, but we have to appropriate that same amount to cover that cost in the child care fund.
No, I understand we need to appropriate it in the budget, but the actual cost is only half of that, correct?
Well-
Because basically our revenue goes up.
It is, but we had taken the revenue out when we eliminated the positions, and now when we put the positions back in, that revenue will be built back in, but it's going to cover dollar for dollar
Half.
the appropriation increase to the child care fund. Those are the technical adjustments that we'll bring back in the revised budget.
Dean, could we
Yeah,
have
but-
a
but-
copy of that?
But in terms of
You stopped
dollars,
at Sunny.
Oh,
Mike and I didn't get
Or
it.
Beth.
Which
And
ones are
Beth,
Or Dick.
The unemployment one.
the unemployment one.
I didn't get it.
Well, you know, Commissioner, I had the same question.
I mean, you understand my point.
I do. And we tried to get with Greg, but he's out today at a conference, so.
We don't need to get with Greg. I mean,
Okay.
I work with this fund, I'm not trying to be difficult, I work with this fund almost every week, and we have 100% of the cost, the staffing, the FTEs are in the general fund. We have to bill 100% of that cost to the child care fund, and the state reimburses us at 50%. That 50%, we do have because we invoice it to the child care fund, we have a revenue in the general fund that's half of that cost.
Right.
But the county is responsible for 50% of the child care fund budget because the state grant only covers, I can document this for you in a flow chart. There is no additional revenue here by doing this because we have a higher appropriation to the child care fund. Right now, the child care fund budget that we have in the recommended budget does not include these FTEs being added back.
Okay, so when we add them back,
We're gonna have to raise the appropriation to the child care fund.
right,
Which will be covered.
by that same amount.
Correct. The revenue will cover that increase in the appropriation.
We'll cover half of the increase.
But we're only responsible for half of the cost in the child care fund because of the state grant that pays for 50%.
Oh, what you're saying is the child care fund for us, is funded at half.
Right.
Correct. That's a separate fund. It's not the general fund, but you have to appropriate money to cover our 50% cost share
Right.
in that fund, and then the state pays us.
It's almost sounding like we get a quarter of it back.
No, it doesn't.
No, you get a
All right, I know.
half.
I should've shut up.
You have
You get
to maximize our state grant, we have to bill 100% of the cost to the fund. And those positions, those FTEs, whether they're intensive probation officers or truancy folks, we have to have 100% of that cost there to recover 50% from the state, because the state only pays 50% of the total cost.
Yeah, but, I understand that. I understand we need to, put all of that into the budget. But there's two halves to the budget. There's expenditures and there's revenue.
That is correct.
And so, taken over a whole year, then our revenue is going to go up by half of what our expenditures did.
That is correct. There will be a revenue.
We're sitting here looking for, little bits and pieces. I mean, Larry's looking for $500 for,
I already found it.
for
I
MPOC.
already found
Yeah, we
it.
haven't voted on it yet.
You're gonna
No
write a
offense,
check.
but-
I know.
I
It's pretty
mean-
simple, but
So my question is,
Didn't get it.
we're looking for little pieces of money to, cobble it all together to to try to, keep these people employed, and I'm just saying that it seems that, I understand we're going to put $173,000 back into the budget, but we're also going to get another, $87,000 more or less in revenue.
That's absolutely correct. But my position right now is you're going to need that revenue to cover an $87,000 appropriation to the child care fund because of that cost being billed back into the, and we do not have the child care fund state budget completed at this point. If we can somehow maximize that there is real revenue to the county over and above the appropriation increase to the child care fund, I'll be the first one to tell you that.
Is there a reason it would not be an increase?
Without having the budget complete, I can't tell you that. And the conservative thing to do is to say that that revenue is needed now to cover the increase in the appropriation.
Can I just say, if that's you being difficult, you're probably pretty easy to work with?
But
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's not a real
Just say
comment, Beth, come on.
thank you.
I'm just saying, he said he was being difficult, and I said.
No, it's that,
We had a lot of difficulty with this when we were working.
If we spend more money, we get more revenue from the state.
That's correct.
Okay, so the actual cost to us is not $173,000. The actual cost over a year is $87,000.
That is correct. But you
Okay.
have to fund you have to put real money in the child care fund to cover your 50% match.
Right, and then we get that back later, right?
Correct.
Okay. And since we're not living, thankfully, paycheck to paycheck, we can probably carry that for a few weeks or months if we have to.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to see the state
trying.
budget first.
Okay.
I just want it noted, I noticed that one of the employees that we're talking about eliminating their position, the grounds maintenance worker, and Dennis, I know you're aware of this, Commission on Aging has grounds people that take care of our seniors, and I believe after the first of the year, there is an opening.
Yeah.
And Georgia did mention that she would give.
She's holding the position open in case someone could bump into that position.
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
Yeah.
And that in turn would also save us the unemployment compensation.
Yes, it would.
Yes. But,
Not only beneficial for the employee,
yeah,
but.
but it would be
It would cover the
simplistic to
employment
expect that grounds maintenance person is going to move over to the Commission on Aging. That's a union employee. Commission on Aging is non-union. There's a whole bumping process that has to go through on the union. But somebody who might qualify will probably move over to that position, and that saves a job for somebody and saves the unemployment, so yes. Okay, so in terms of this is, Jen put this together today for you. This is what the estimate of unemployment cost would be. The counties are responsible for, we're responsible for the first 26 weeks, and then the federal government picks it up after that. Commissioner Richardson pointed out the fact that this does not assume that these people have dependents. Each dependent costs an extra $6 a week, according to Jen. But she stated in here, this is just assuming they don't have dependents. So if they have dependents, it's going to be more, but it's not going to be substantially more. I think the interesting thing to point out here, and so you see several of these positions are vacant, so we don't pay unemployment. The interesting thing is at the bottom of the page that shows an estimate of $96,000, and this is probably a conservative high estimate. If we do the second option on custodians, if there's not a lot to be saved through contracting, that number goes down to $55,000. So, just keep that in mind. But this is the unemployment numbers. If you have any questions, Jen's here to answer them.
Do we, how do we fund the 96,000?
That is a one-time expense, and I recommended in the initial budget that we fund it out of fund balance, or now I would recommend we fund the one-time expense out of that tax delinquent savings, because it's a one-time expense.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last thing I have, I don't even know, do you want to see the cost of savings on a personal day unit by unit now, or do you want to wait till we talk about that?
Well, that's fine.
Want to see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the, Jen's department, Jen's staff broke this out among all the various groups we have so that the commission can see the cost. And the one thing that I am noticing, Jen, that's not in here, I don't see elected officials. Are they listed under non-contract exempt? That may be one.
I'm not sure that.
They don't get personal
They don't
days.
I was going to
personal
say,
days.
you know,
Yeah.
they're salaried. It's
Yeah, they don't get personal days. That's why.
No, they don't.
No, because they don't get vacation, they don't get any, they don't get any of that, they just take time off. That's part of their, that's part of what they are as elected officials. Thank you. So anyway, this is the number, and it's broken out by the various groups. Now, if you want to talk about this a little bit, I don't know if this is the appropriate time. You want to talk about this now, or do you want to go back to the other budget, and we can talk about this later?
No.
I have a couple comments to make on this. We talked about this some today, and, you know, all this has to be negotiated with the unions, and we talked about it a little bit last night, but I think we have a different approach that if we decide to do this, that we'd like you to consider. And it's really, as much as anything, it's a matter of perception. But in our discussions today with the staff of the HR department, we think a better approach to this might be something along this line, that the county board decide so many days next year that are going to be furlough days. They still have to be negotiated. But let me give you an example. If the 4th of July is on a Monday next year, you say Friday the 1st, the county buildings will be closed. Okay? Employees will not be paid. We're going to have a furlough day. But we will allow employees to use one of their personal days as a vacation day that day so they don't have to lose any pay. So in effect, what it's doing is it's using personal days as a day off, which saves us the cost of paying that out at the end of the year. And so in talking with some of the staff, employees might feel better about the idea of a furlough day where they have discretion either not to take pay or to use one of their personal days, and it still saves you that kind of money. Now, the quirk in it is some of our 24-hour operations. We'd have to iron that out and figure out, what do we do? Do we tell them they have to take a furlough day and they can take it at their discretion? This all, you know, we just worked on this today, so we don't have it all figured out. But rather than try to negotiate to take away 2 personal days of pay, it almost would make sense to say we're going to close 2 days, put it around a holiday or something, close the buildings, and allow them to use one of their personal days so they don't lose pay. And we think that might be a more acceptable and more agreeable alternative to employees. That's just a guess on our part, but it's something we'd like you to, at some point in the future, consider. Anyway, this is the cost, the savings of a personal day. And that's all we have to pass out to you.
Interesting. Since we're all silent,
That must be good.
yeah. Well, maybe we're all caught up in the moment. I guess I have a suggestion on the COG. We want to take it up now or not, but Dean and I talked about just a neutral way of handling that, and that is just to move that line item over to the Board of Commissioners general fund, or general line item. And the telephone expense for the Board of Commissioners, you have to understand that's part of the administration cost, has an overline amount of $600 that, based on the year-to-date expense, we believe it's going to be over budget by at least a minimum of $600 for 011. So Dean and I just suggested that, we talked about it, maybe the easiest way to handle that is just to move that over to the Board of Commissioners budget along with, you know, together with MAC and NACO, because they're all 3 county commissioner-owned and operated organizations. The 537, we'll just move I'll just take the $600 overage on the telephone expense and move it move it over to supplement the COG. I think it's just a neutral way of doing it. It's probably just the easiest way to handle that. That's what I would recommend.
You know, Larry, I'm glad you went back to appropriations because on the appropriations, as I mentioned, I had just heard today about the fireworks, them not doing that in 2011. So that's one that we don't have to worry about. You know, the other three notables that are not in there is the Human Services Coordinating Council, which we've just heard is a good value for the county as far as it includes all of those county departments and supports the collaboration of services.
Right.
The other is fire education through Metro, which we have a contract with them for 3 years, and this would be the last year of that contract. Just like we have a contract with, Traverse City Housing Commission. And then the EDC, I do think that the work that they do on behalf of the county is notable and substantial to those businesses that have utilized their services.
If I can interject on the EDC, I really think we need to explore if more money can come out of the revolving loan fund to support that.
Sure.
Well, I think we've checked on that a little bit and found out that
Well, I
we
think
have to
that-
get authorization from the state.
Yeah, but I think we're finding that that's possible. And
Oh, really?
well, we don't have a firm word from the state on it, but remember, there's also about $20,000 in that set-aside fund balance of an EDC fund that you might transfer, and then if they need more administrative money, they can actually go ask for administrative money for administration. So that would be another option for you. I don't mean to, I'm not trying to press this, I'm trying to find an organizational process that might be useful. And I'm just going to suggest this. If the general parameters that I laid out in this proposal are something that you have interest in or that seems to have consensus with commissioners, you might want to consider focusing in on this. And the reason I say that is because on the back page, it shows that you're increasing the CIP by $227,000. Okay? Then a suggestion would be, then once you've decided how you want to modify this, you could look at what revenue's left in that CIP fund and discuss these special appropriations and see if you want to use some of that and maybe vote on them individually.
That or, as Ross had noticed, a fund that was existing that we're not really utilizing. And
Yeah.
I've misplaced my listing of all of those funds where we have money sitting in them. I mean, it would be reasonable, it's the last year of the contract, and then and also for him, EDC until it's taken out of a different account to appropriate something from one of those funds that is sitting there towards that appropriation.
Well, and I might add to that, Commissioner, that those funds are there. I might add that those funds are there. Those funds aren't going anywhere. And so, it doesn't necessarily mean that that decision has to be made in conjunction directly with this budget. You could make that, you could have that discussion at Ways and Means next month and decide to move money from fund balance to an appropriation. Just like you could decide that you're going to look at this, you still have money in your contingency this year. You could decide to take $5,500 of that contingency and use it for the coordinating council for next year. There are various ways you can address those special appropriations. But that fund balance, if it's there, it's going to stay there until you decide to do something with it, so.
And that's another appropriation that we've made historically, and we always have an excessive amount of discussion about, is the appropriation to Civic Center South.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't
I
believe
forgot about
that is
that.
in this budget.
No, it's not.
And we always get into the discussion about whether or not we're going to have fund balance at the end of the year to use that. If we're going to talk about all the appropriations that we historically made, we should talk about Civic Center South also. Mr. Fleece would be
we have a 3-year
rolling over if I
on that?
No.
didn't at least mention that.
Do we make a
I'm just-
3-year commitment on that?
No.
We did not.
Yeah, I mean, we've done 3 years. I think Commissioner Fleece told me we had a 5-year commitment on that. All I remember is that we had a 1-year commitment on that and said, you come back every year and we'll talk about it. I just want to add this on behalf of the county departments, and it goes back to what Commissioner Maxbauer said. I totally understand and respect the fact that the board sees value in these outside appropriations. I understand that. I understand their value, and I think it's reasonable for the commission to consider making these appropriations. But I do think making them in conjunction with the fact that we're going to be eliminating, it looks like, I don't know, potentially 18 jobs.
Well, actually, if you look at the ones not recommended for reinstatement and subtract out the positions that are vacant now, it's only about 10 3/4, and 6 of those are the custodians, which, there still seems a chance that some or most of those will not necessarily be laid off, because I don't think you've made a good case that we save any money for it.
Well, you're right, Commissioner.
So really, we're not talking about that many jobs.
Well, okay.
But
I guess I would just caution for everything that's been going on in regards to this budget and the cuts. I would much rather see you, and maybe it's just semantics, address those things separately as opposed to address them at a time when we're cutting employees and then adding back in appropriations. It's just my personal opinion, and I won't say anything more.
Personally, I don't know if it's possible to have a uniform policy on all these little extra, bits of money that we hand out, because we don't, and the best argument that people seem to make that was why they should get it is because they've always gotten it. And I'm not sure that's a good argument.
Well, I think we have a couple different situations. We do have in place a contract with Metro Fire for a 3-year contract. We still have a year of that contract left.
We do.
We absolutely do. Now, the appropriations that we've made historically to Civic Center South, there is no formal commitment to that money. There is no formal commitment to the fireworks. But we do have a signed contract with Metro Fire.
True.
That's true.
And we have a signed contract with the Traverse City Housing Authority for $40,000, but that's at the point where it's on month to month. It could be canceled at any time. Another possibility for that $40,000, which would free up money for some of your other little, the other little pet projects, would be to fund that from the newly formed Housing Trust Fund. Since that money's not being used for anything.
Or to fund it from the 18,
We haven't formed it yet.
Well, but the point is there's money sitting there in the foreclosure fund, which has been earmarked for a housing trust.
or to fund it from the 18% administrative money that we get through our grant that we give to the city.
Well, they're getting that already.
Well, because we're giving it to them
And
on a month-by-month contract.
my point is we're giving that to them in addition to the 40,000,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons why I suggested a year ago that maybe we didn't need to give them the 40,000.
Well, I think there's also some discussion among the Housing Authority about the possibility of evaluating whether that's an appropriate arrangement, being part of the City Housing Commission. I think there's some discussion among the housing group about looking at the possibility of a countywide housing authority. So I think before we start spending that money, we should see where that goes. That's just my advice.
If in fact we create a housing trust fund, we will have to form a county housing authority. There's no other legal way for us to do that.
Okay.
Poor Chris.
That's all right, I don't mind waiting. I'm going to once again strongly object to the appropriations. I mean, if we are going to make appropriations, why not the MSU Extension Safe Kids program? What did we spend last year? Maybe, $20,000, towards Jen Ritter's Safe Kids program, and she brought a $45,000 grant back to Grand Traverse County for bicycle helmets for kids. I just got an email within the last week saying there's approximately $500,000 in grants available that will fund, swimming education, which certainly would help, Eastlink Pools' bottom line, as well as children in this community. every single appropriation that we make is valuable in some way, shape, or form. But at this particular point in time, I believe that we have a contract, in my mind, to serve the county residents, and we have county employees that we're talking about eliminating their positions. And we just can't do it all anymore, and we've got to pick and choose. To say that we're going to appropriate money just because we've always done it, in my mind, is not reason enough. Not when we're talking about eliminating a road patrol deputy, family court employee, a probation officer, a probation officer in family court, a probation officer in district court. These are all important positions, and I may be in the minority, but, that's not a new hat for me. So I simply will not appropriate money when we're eliminating these positions. And I believe that these positions are valuable.
Dennis, can you remind me, what is this?
Dennis is-
300?
Dennis is not here.
I'm looking down here, I'm like, Dennis, okay,
You
Dean,
can still ask the question.
what's this 340,000 substance abuse? I have a lapse of memory on that one.
We receive from the state liquor
Liquor
funds.
tax money or whatever it
Yeah,
is?
and it has to be by statute. We have to designate or appropriate to the designated substance abuse facility. So we have, we receive approximately $680,000. This is a budgeted number. 50% of that has to go to that designated agency for substance abuse programs. It's a statutory requirement. We receive the funding, but 50% has to go back out to that agency.
Right. Well, let me ask you another subsequent question. Dennis's suggestion that we take this in two parts. One is perhaps making a recommendation to move forward with the 2011 budget modifications as presented by staff, and that if the CPI goes up higher than 1%, the board, during its normal course of doing budget adjustments in 2011, can choose to take that funding level and either fund positions or take a look at these other things that we've said no to.
You would have the ability, and you do throughout the course of the year, to amend your budget. That is an option. You would not have to set those appropriation requests at this point.
Okay.
The other thing in regards to that
Yeah.
that's helpful if you decide that is, if you waited, you would, in a month, you'll know what the CPI turned out to be. And then you'll know whether you needed to use any of that we set aside as a hedge to make up anything in the CPI. If the CPI comes in at 1 or greater, you know that whole $438,000 is uncommitted. It's just in the capital fund.
So assuming that we would vote on the budget in our October board meeting, and it would be presented at Ways and Means in October to give notice to the public as well, we would know that number before it goes to the board meeting? Or true or not?
When do we get it?
It should be around the middle of October. I think the State Tax Commission last year was pretty close to October 15th. So it's going to be, you would have it. There wouldn't be any, Ways and Means is on the 20th, so you could make some you could still make changes to your budget.
I think probably a more appropriate way to do it would be just to adopt the budget and then revisit those. That's capital improvement fund, if you wanted to remove some money from there to handle some of this other stuff. That would be and do that in November or December if you wanted to.
You mean put those appropriations basically on hold until we see where we're at?
Yeah. And I mean, if you wanted to have it in a more technically appropriate number, instead of putting the 438,000 in there, bump the contingency by 50 or 100,000 and set your contingency at 2. You control your contingency. You're the only one who can spend your contingency. If you don't spend it during 2012, put it back in the CIP fund.
Yeah. Where are we at on our contingency right now for this?
100, oh, for this year?
It was only 70-some thousand to begin with. It was very small, but
I think we're at 50, aren't we, or so?
I'm not sure. We
When you say we're at 50, we have 50 left, or we spent 50?
No,
might be able to find out.
yeah, we have some left. He'll check.
Okay.
I think that's probably a good idea to basically delay the decision on some of the appropriations.
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
I think it's a good thought.
And if you're not comfortable just leaving it in the CIP, take some of it and put it in your $100,000 contingency, and then you're the ones who control it. Only you can spend it, and if you don't decide not to spend it, it's just left over, you can move it back to CIP at the end of next year.
But I will say one thing on the business owners that I saw that came to talk here about how they had increased the number of employees in their companies directly based on the EDC's actions. That increases the revenue to which we're able to fund those employees that you're talking about. So I think that's an important correlation. When I was looking at your sheet on the 2011 budget modifications, so we're not, it's important to note, we're not further eroding fund balance. Basically, what you've got here is increases in revenues.
That's true, and we feel that they're reasonable increases in revenues. And, frankly, I think Dean and I, while we don't know for sure, we think we're pretty safe on that 1% CPI increase, based on the fact that after 11 months, it's 1.6. It seems like one is safe, but to take it a step further and being extra conservative, we have that hedge of the money that's freed up in the tax delinquent fund. So I think we feel totally comfortable with that.
Dennis, the one question I had in the 2011 recommended budget, and I'm looking right now at the vehicles that are recommended for appropriation in the CIP, and these 9 vehicles or whatever are in fact in the budget that we've already,
That's correct.
as you adopted it.
There's about a
So-
$625,000 capital improvement appropriation. That's the road commission plus these vehicles.
About $166,500 for the county vehicles.
Yes. And Dean has an answer to your question about the current contingency.
Your current contingency balance is $65,896. We started the year, you have not used any, and that was an item that was reduced at the last minute to replace the furlough day amount. So there was a cost center that went down. It was a very small contingency to begin with. You have not used any of that at this point.
Have we given $25,000 yet this year to Civic Center South? I can't remember if we've done it or not.
I always lose
Because I know
track
it's
of the
coming out of
years.
contingency we have, and I know
What-
Commissioner Fleece will certainly bring it up.
What we did, Commissioner Maxbauer, we were looking at that last fall. I would not commit to where we would end the year in terms of a fund balance use. An appropriation was made early this year. You increased the use of your fund balance. We started with a $950,000 fund balance. We made 2 budget amendments, one of which was for the Civic Center South appropriation.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to the not recommended for reinstatement part, Dennis, and I realize the not recommended for reinstatement comes from you and Dean, essentially. Is that based mostly just on shortage of money?
No, well, the not recommended for reinstatement was based on the direction you gave us last night. You told us that you wanted us to put a budget together with all of the number 1 priorities and 3 number 2 priorities, and that's what
Right.
we did. These were what were left after you gave us direction. That's what those are.
Okay, I mean, what's your personal feeling? I mean, and we're not talking about positions we don't need in your mind.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Now, there are a couple of positions there that are open that I think we're fine without. I'd like to leave them in the staffing plan, but I don't think we need to appropriate.
Can you identify those again real quickly?
Sure, the assistant prosecuting attorney. The deputy, that's a vacancy.
The probation officer down.
The probation officer in family courts.
I think the office specialist,
District Court.
And the district court probation officer.
Okay, thanks.
One. Probation.
One of those.
I was going to Yeah.
Yeah, it's only one.
The other one is she wants to go down in hours.
I was told, well, my notes from last night, for district court probation officers, I note that we have 1 FTE and a .3 vacancy.
Well, remember Carol said that she thought there was only a .3 vacancy.
Right.
So I reminded her of a termination last Friday. That was a full-time probation
Okay.
officer.
How do you get to a .3?
Well, is the .3 because somebody's looking for a reduction
I
in
think she's
hours?
looking to
Oh, is that
reduce
it?
her hours down.
Oh, okay.
There is one
Or it's a
employee.
grant-funded position.
No, one employee
No.
is looking to
She's looking to
reduce
reduce
their
the
hours.
hours down, just like the one in Dean's office is looking to reduce hours down.
Okay. What was I going to say? Oh, the reduction in office specialists for central records, and we're talking about 2.5 clerks.
Yeah. The sheriff has indicated to me that, and the undersheriff, that they're fairly comfortable with those reductions. And that's primarily because of the new world system that's coming in that you appropriated $700,000 for. They think they're going to be a lot more efficient, and I don't think this was probably the lowest priority on their list.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't hear them asking for it, so that would seem to be.
Yeah,
but-
that's based on our conversations with them in budgets.
But the efficiencies will start being felt.
They're already
Okay, all
already
right.
starting. I can't give you much advice on the community services work supervisor. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that one, so I can't. The accounting technician, I'm deferring to Dean's. When we put this letter together, it was a number 1 priority for me. Dean insisted it's a 2 priority, and I think that's just more his self-sacrifice than anything, to be honest with you. But I'm willing to try it, but if it causes us not to be able to get work done, I'm going to be back talking to you about putting it back.
Is this someone who's going from full-time to part-time?
Yes. As I said, the assistant prosecuting attorney, I've had a long discussion with Al about that, and he is very willing to try this, and I think he's going to give it a fair trial, so I think we can leave that one. The grounds maintenance worker, you got a letter from that grounds maintenance worker. This is going to be problematic to have this person gone. They do a lot of work. But I was questioning whether he needed a custodial supervisor, and I had a long discussion with him after your first budget hearing, and I said, I need an answer from you. If you had to choose between these two, what would it be? And he clearly told me the custodial supervisor was more important to him than this groundskeeper. So I still think it's an important position, but I'm basing that on what the department head said. The central records office specialist we talked about, the deputy, that's really, deputy is a deputy. Now, they've gone since May down 2 or 3 deputies. Again, here's a case where I would definitely keep it in the staffing plan, but they have right now 3
We
vacancies.
still have to
so-
note too, these, even though they're on this report as road deputies, up until 2 weeks ago, these were community or school liaison officers,
Yeah.
all 4 of them.
But, it's important. The sheriff, I think, is right when he says
And
that,
they are down from where we were in 2002, and I'm all aware of
They're still going to have
that.
to answer those calls.
they're down 5. And remember that the difference here is while those 4 people moved
Created a
back
lot of
over to the
their own work.
road, that's absolutely true. They're now handling all the caseload that comes from the school. They're still going to have to handle. So it's not like 4 left there and 4 on the road. 4 might have left there, maybe 1.5 or 2 are on the road because they're going to be at the schools all the time. So it's just important to note that. I don't think it's fair to say they get 4 additional people. I don't think they are. So, but, and I think the sheriff last night made it pretty clear, he really wants that position back. That's best I can give you on that. They do have trouble making calls, but yet, if he was asked the question, I would have liked to heard the answer to the question last night. You're down 3 officers since May. The busy season, how has that impacted your work? What kind of problems has it caused you? We didn't ask that question, but it would have been an interesting question to have answered. So, but it's obviously a deputy, a very important position, I know to all of you. Family court probation officer, that's been open for 1.5 years now. Judge told me that's fine to leave open. Again, leave it in the staffing plan, but I think that can go.
Wait, not that long. Roger
Not a
just-
1.5 years?
No, Roger left earlier this summer.
This summer?
Yeah, that's
I'm sorry,
3
I
or
thought
4
it was
months.
longer. Okay, it's only been a few months, but the judge said he's fine with that staying open. MSU office specialist, we didn't get into detail on that 0.2 of a person, so I can't tell you, but I know that Pat is willing to try to make go of whatever, you give him, and really, I look at this as just truly a transition year. Next year is where we're really gonna roll up our sleeves and look at that contract and decide what the contribution of the state's gonna be and what the contribution of the county's gonna be.
Well, I
It'll be
think
an interesting
MSU
year.
Extension is going to have a completely different look a year from now than it has right now, and what we've been accustomed to seeing.
And actually, I think also, just to note, I think a vacancy has just recently is going to be either is official or is very close to official in that department that affects this. So I think it's going to be vacant, or part of it will be vacant. So I don't feel strongly that you have to do anything with that. The custodians, this is really just a situation that I think my advice to you would be, you said it last night, you got $200,000 that we're putting back into that budget. I think it'll be very interesting to see what the bids come out. And if the bids save money, I think you have to look strongly at that. If you decide that you're going to keep the positions and not go out on contract, my suggestion is you do what Danny said he could live with. You give him 5 instead of 6, which is that $200,000, and you tell him rearrange how he does the cleaning in a way that he gets the best bang for that buck.
Dennis, why couldn't the union bid on that work?
Well, you're talking about a process that's been used other places, Indianapolis and other places. That's my answer to that question is you need to take the time to set up the systems to allow that to take place. That's not something you just do
All right.
overnight.
The other question I have is...
You already have a bid, Commissioner. I mean, first of all, we don't allow the unions to bid on anything. I mean, the unions aren't in a position to determine the way work is done in the county. That would be my position, at least at this point in time, but I may...
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to put it, I'm just asking the question. I don't know the answer.
I think the question is, why doesn't the department bid on it? That's really what you're saying. Why doesn't the department bid?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what we're saying is, we have union contracts that set their wages. We know what that bid is. We know what the cost of that is. Now I think it's important to find out what the cost of the contract is. And if we save money with the contract, I really feel strongly that it's worth looking at.
And the other question I have is, and actually this idea came to me in a conversation with Mr. Lemkool, is if we do have a contractor do our custodial work, is there some way we can ask for county employees to be given preferential hiring treatment? Because as Mr. Lemkool pointed out to me, if a business is going to expand their work, generally they need to expand their staff.
I think that's a good question. We've asked that as well. I think our intention would be that when the bids come in, if they appear to be financially to our advantage, then one of the things I think we would do is sit down with the company and talk about that possibility of hiring county employees. Not only, and it may cost us a little more to do that, I have no idea, I've never done that, but it would save us on employment certainly, and it would keep people working that are currently working. So
And are experienced.
yeah, and so that has the potential. We have the potential to do that. Yes.
If we leave those 4 vacancies vacant, we want to kind of come up with just a little over $500,000 to keep everybody. Plus the priority ones.
Right.
Well, I'd like to take a stab at a motion and try to accommodate some of the comments that I've heard so far, is that I would move to direct staff for the 2011 budget, the handout we have for the 2011 budget modification as presented, and it would be presented in final form at the October Ways and Means meeting, and that at the October Ways and Means meeting, based on new information of the CPI and other revenue sources, the committee can then discuss the non-recommended positions for reinstatement, as well as the supplemental appropriations that have not been recommended. So I'd make that motion.
Support.
Moved and supported.
I want to say, if you decide to do this motion, another key point would be, we will have the bids at the end of September on the custodial services, and so that would come to RMA the second week in October, so you'd have an answer, you could potentially have an answer on that before you adopt the budget.
All right.
I guess, Ian, at least in my mind, I kind of would like to handle this as two separate pieces, but, that's the way the motion is, and I supported the motion. I don't have any problem with the budget modifications as outlined by Dean and Dennis. I think they did a great job. I still have reservations about some of the positions that we've left out, but I also have some significant thoughts that possibly some of those can be left out and still efficiently provide service to this community.
I mean, I could break the motion up if you'd like.
It's fine.
Sonny,
Okay, all right.
yesterday, or I thought it was you, perhaps Larry Felice, maybe both, weren't comfortable with the 1% CPI increase factored in. Are you indeed more comfortable with that now?
Well, Dennis beat me up last night after the meeting because he told me in previous years I've approved budgets that had tax estimates in them that we didn't have either, so,
Well, I mean, every year we project
we always
what a
project
tax
what
increase is
It's
going to
reasonable
be.
to me.
Every year we do that, and so that, I didn't beat you up. I just reminded you.
It's a moving target.
We're
It
a
is.
long ways from where we were 5 years ago, but I think we're safe with that based on the 1.6 that we're seeing right now.
I will vote for the motion, but, and I think that the 2011 budget, the approach that you're taking is appropriate and where you found the revenues. But I do think that this commission has to be cognizant that they're using, $625,000 of fund balance, and you're planning on using $625,000 of that next year, and then you're planning on tapering off. I think that you have to be very, very careful. And, how are you going to control those expenditures in the future?
Well, if I
And
could.
you might have other mitigating factors, I
No,
understand that.
no.
I'm just talking about what I'm seeing in front of me
It's-
this year during
It's
these-
very legitimate, and it's something the board has to be aware of. I would point out that if we follow through with the direction that we've been given, next year we're changing to budgeting for outcomes, and
Exactly.
we're going to be budgeting in a whole different manner. So we can set the cost of government at whatever we choose next year, and maybe that's even $625,000 less. So we're not using fund balance, and then we're going to be basing it on priorities in a whole different, so next year gives us an opportunity to change the system fundamentally, I
Yep.
think.
And when you're doing that and you're changing or identifying your priorities, you may be able to eliminate actual areas of service in totality rather than just shaving off a marginal amount from many of them.
Programmatic changes, I
Exactly.
think. Yes, I agree.
Exactly.
Could you read the motion? I'm sorry. Could you read the motion?
I would have difficulty with that.
Want me to
Commissioner
restate the motion
Richardson.
for you?
I would appreciate that.
Okay. Restating my motion is to,
Pull your microphone a little closer.
I'm having a difficulty hearing.
all right, okay. My motion was to restate my motion was to move forward with regarding to the 2011 budget, the 2011 budget modifications report presented by staff as a guideline, and that and it would be finalized at our October Ways and Means meeting. And also at that meeting, we will look at any additional revenues like the CPI that at that time we would discuss the positions that are not reinstated as well as the supplemental appropriations that are not funded.
You still support it?
That's fine. I guess the one thing that, it's been a peeve of mine for the last 3 weeks, I guess, these are not recommended for reinstatement. These are positions that we are retaining.
Correct.
There's not a reinstatement, right? We are retaining these positions. We're not
Not getting
reinstating.
rid of them.
Right.
You know, and
We are not eliminating them.
we have not yet eliminated them. They're still here for another 4 months, 3 months.
Your words were in my head today when I was putting this together, but I couldn't think of a better way
And
to
you
say
turned
it,
around
so I
and wrote
left it.
reinstatement
And I
again.
just figured you'd tell me tonight, but I couldn't think of a better way to say it.
Right.
Retained
Retain-
positions.
Retain.
Retained positions. I like
Retention,
retained
yes.
positions better than I do reinstated positions because they are still in
Recommended
place right now.
So basically, Larry, what you're saying is, we have a rough guide and we'll make the
Right.
final decisions
At Ways and Means. And then that
the
would
third
be-
week of October.
Right, and then that would be that recommendation would go to the full board, and that would give the public
And we'll have,
the notice that we normally give.
and we'll have a better idea
About the CPI.
of about a lot of things. right?
About a lot of
Not
things.
just the CPI.
Correct.
Do we normally do our budget hearing in October or November?
October. We adopt the budget the last week in October. We do our tax allocation, tax rates when? Ways and Means?
Yes.
We do the tax rates, the estimated tax rates in Ways and Means, and you'll do the budget that same night, at least to put the final touches on it, hopefully to get it to the board the next week.
You know, I won't say this very eloquently, but I'll just say it, and I'd like to, you know, extend an appreciation to all the employees that have followed this process, and, you know, I'm sure that it's been a real tentative situation for them. Employees also who have, you know, and department heads who have looked for areas to increase revenues, looked for areas where they can cut that it doesn't impact, and I just want to recognize that I know it's been a difficult situation.
Right. I think we all feel the same.
And,
Further discussion, yeah?
That's well said.
yeah, and while I'm not voting for this motion, I do, I do want to say, Dennis, thank you for going back and taking a look at the Parks and Rec budget. I think that that $18,000 is extremely helpful this year. The reason I'm not going to support this motion is because I am not convinced that we are going to have an increase in tax revenue. I appreciate that my fellow commissioners disagree with me, and I certainly respect that disagreement. But I view what we are doing as plugging a hole without really solving the problem long-term. I'm just, you know, I'm concerned about the CPI 1%. I'm concerned about what property values are coming in at. I'm concerned about the Michigan Tax Tribunal, what impact that's going to have on our budget. So,
You know, I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I think I've said before, you have to look at this in context of a larger strategy, and that larger strategy may indeed be the different budgeting process that you're going to be
and I
looking at
agree that
in
that is the
2012.
That's true.
Having said
Budget
that,
strategy.
That's true.
This is, for me, in taking a look at it, because I struggle with this too, because the fund balance thing, I mean, I've been thinking about it and talking about it for a while, so I struggle with it, but, you know, for the year 2011, what are you to do? You know, doing the prioritization and strategizing for a different type of a budget analysis, and it takes time, and that's not something we have for the 2011 budget. So, and I know you said these jobs are important to.
I believe they
to
are.
reinstate.
Absolutely.
But, you know, if we don't use that, we can't reinstate them, and we'll be going right up on that list to the top of it.
Appreciate it.
Ross?
And I'll address this to both Beth and Chris. You both voted against the budget last year, and you have been consistently voting against things this year, but yet in the meetings, I hear one or both of you say, oh, we absolutely have to fund this, and we have to fund that.
You haven't heard that come out of my mouth.
You've said it over and over again in regards to the sheriff's department, which is the
Oh, I
biggest,
do.
which is the biggest chunk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a little rosier view than you do, but if your view is really, you know, that dark about, you know, where we're going revenue-wise, then I don't know how you can I don't know how you can support, retaining all these positions. So, I mean, you have to, I guess I'm accusing you of being inconsistent, if you will, that if you really think we're not going to have the money, then we have to cut even deeper than we've been talking about, so.
Well,
You know,
we do have the money because.
Well, no, and I see, Dick, I agree with you, and
Yeah.
I think, we are trimming back, and we'll know more in a few months, and if we
Yeah.
have to really cut, we can cut then, but.
Oh, I got one question for you
Yes, sir.
before I'm ready to vote. Did you put any money into this septic plant?
No,
Nothing in the budget?
well,
Well, I don't want to.
no, but remember, as one of the commissioners, I think Commissioner
That-
Friend asked me
it was
that
that.
question. This budget, just based on this assumption, has, establishing $438,000 from the tax delinquent fund that'll go into the CIP. Now, again, I said maybe 211 of that is there as a hedge if the 1%, let's say we get no tax increase. Well, that can replace that. That still leaves 227,000. And if the board decided that they wanted to partner with the townships, we've been losing about $400,000 a year. Half of that is 200,000. There's 227,000 there. There would be enough to cover that if you chose to use it for that.
I'm not in favor of putting it in the budget because,
Yeah.
to me, the next move is up to them.
Well, you haven't put it in the budget. I'm just identifying a place
Well-
that money is if you need it. But another thing to mention on that, if we get to that point when we have that discussion, Commissioner Friend brought this up today, and I think if you decided to go down that road, I think it makes sense, her suggestion that we go down that road only till we can refinance those bonds and then take another look at it to see where we're at. I heard today that we've got a source of waste that's coming in that might be 30 to 50,000 gallons a week at 12 cents. And they're negotiating details of it now. I mean, if that's $200,000 to $300,000 a year. One of those kind of helps make up a lot of this, but it's just not known now, so I wouldn't even deal with it as part of this budget.
Commissioner Richardson, I have never been completely opposed to taking money out of fund balance. And you are exactly right. I do believe that our priority needs to be public safety. These positions are all good positions. They are not necessarily the positions that I would put in a Tier 1.
Okey-dokey.
Want me to say something back?
Crossfire.
Like it.
Open meeting.
Any further discussion before we start getting silly?
Oh, it wouldn't be silly, it'd be serious, but all right.
call vote.
Better do a roll call, I guess.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Roll call vote. I just thought she might change her mind.
Nah. Commissioner Max Bauer. No. I'm sorry.
No.
No, sorry. Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Got public comment, I think.
Is he walking around with more paper to hand out? Okay.
I have something else before you get to public comment. When we were discussing I can't remember if that was at RMA or Ways and Means, but when we were discussing bidding or not bidding out the health insurance agent, you commented that, that we were always looking and, looking at those insurance contracts and rebidding them and seeing if there are ways we could save money and so forth. Last year, we approved the Priority Health over the Blue Care Network, even though Blue Care Network would save us about somewhere around $100,000, mainly because the argument was given that certain medical practices would not accept Blue Care Network as a payee. And I think the two examples that were used were the Thurlby Clinic and Grand Traverse internists or internal medicine or whatever. I would just like to comment that knowledge came to me just today that both of those practices are now accepting Blue Care Network, and is there any potential to, to ask our agent to, to look at a different carrier that might save us some money? On an annual
Absolutely, there
basis?
is. My understanding is we haven't received the bids back on priority yet,
Yeah.
but that we will be getting those soon. And if the board decides they want to go out and look at, get bids on other carriers.
Will the agent be looking at anything besides priority or just priority?
Typically, what we do is we bid it out every 3 years, and then we've stayed with that firm for 3 years unless the bids came in to a level that were unacceptable. And then we have on occasion, I think, rebid it. But typically, we bid it for a 3-year period, and then we go back out every 3 years.
Oh, I see.
But the board has the ability to direct us to go back out sooner than that.
Well, I would like to make, is it possible for me to make a motion then to direct?
No,
It's not on the
do it at
agenda.
our next regular meeting.
Okay.
We may have the bids by
Yeah,
then.
you're right, you're absolutely right.
No,
Yeah.
That's fine.
do it then, no. This is public comment. Just happens
I
to be-
understand, no, that's fine. Well, can you put that on the agenda for our BOC then next Wednesday night?
Sure.
This is public comment.
You go first, Jen, please.
Why don't you do a duet?
Are you gonna dance for us, or what?
Jen Seaman, I'll just address that to Ross, just so you know, we were looking into that. Last I heard that both of those providers had not officially confirmed with Blue Care Network yet, but I haven't heard within the last 2 weeks, so I will follow up on that. But absolutely, I had heard that they were looking to get with Blue Care Network. We had not got a confirmation on that yet, though. And we wanted to make sure that we had that confirmation before going
Can we
forward.
get that, Jen, next week, by next week?
Yeah, I mean, I'll see
get an
what's as
update.
of today, yeah.
Actually, to be clear, what I was told, and I don't remember which was which, that one is accepting it and the other one will be starting on October 1st.
We'll verify it
Yeah.
and have it for you next week.
Jen, can you also check if that does occur, whether, I don't know if the agent can check with the area physicians that have practices, okay? Whether they accept those or they don't accept those?
That's absolutely what, yeah,
That we need- that's
part
what
of the
we need to
process,
do.
yep.
I mean, that was the basis of that whole issue, but. I even called my personal physician, and he said, no. Takes everything else but, okay.
Yep.
Carol Stocking, 86th District Court Administrator. I am sorry I was late to the meeting, so I don't know much of the discussion that happened tonight, but I'm going to assume from what Jen told me, this wasn't discussed. And in my request to the board through the budget, I don't think that this has been addressed yet, and I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't fall off the table without being considered, and that is the incentive payment, offering an incentive payment to employees to encourage them to retire. And it's imperative in the district court that something be offered to encourage this one person to leave, because if he doesn't leave, then we will be forced to lay off 2 probation officers to meet the $141,000 that we were asked to reduce. That's not possible. We can go down 1.3, we cannot go down 2.3, and I know that he will not go without an incentive, and that incentive is built into our proposal, so I really ask that the board reconsider, if you're done with your discussions tonight, reconsider bringing that topic back up, because I think it's important not only for the district court, but for other departments as well. Thank you.
I can comment. And part of the problem here, of course, is the fact that the person in question is on defined benefit, and it's the way that those the defined benefit costs are assigned. When actually, in fact, those costs are not really directly related to that one person. It's just that that's how it's spread out.
Well, and as a matter, and it's factual as well, that if the person retires, the expense doesn't go away.
Right, the liability is still there.
It goes away from from that department, but it
Right.
doesn't go away. We're still going to pay it.
Right.
So it's not even
So
really truly
it
a
would be
saying.
grossly unfair.
But it won't get worse. And every
It will
day
not
they
get worse.
continue to work.
Yeah,
it continues
and,
to get
and
worse.
remember, I told you at the beginning of budget hearings that we are assessing that, Jen's working on that, and we are gonna bring you a recommendation. We're gonna give you an assessment, an analysis of it, but I didn't intend to do it as part of the budget process. I think it's something we're gonna have to look at separately, because it's gonna take some time to get through that. And there are many aspects to it that have to be addressed, the most important one being that it's fairly and equitably made available to all employees
Right.
under a certain set of criteria.
Have you done any analysis of how you would offer an incentive? And
We have
how many people it would impact?
We have some ideas of that, yes, and I think we're going to be bringing that to RMA this next month.
Okay.
I think.
Before we get too far into discussion, this still is public
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak? Okay. I'll close public comment. Now, right along.
I think one of the challenges of trying to put something like that together is, it only, in my mind, it only works for positions that aren't going to be filled. And if you do a broad-based offering, you're going to have your senior people leave, but you still got to hire people to fill those spots.
I believe that the
That's gonna
only
be the
way this
challenge.
makes good sense to do is if the position stays vacant. Okay, now, if you have to provide it, this is just my opinion, and I have not we have not finished the analysis. What I'm trying to figure out, what's problematic to me is, if you have to make it available to a certain group, employees, I'm using an example, 55 years of age with at least 10 years of service.
Kids.
And you have one employee, let's say this employee, who opts to take it, and you give them money to go, and you have another employee who opts to take it, but the position and the person is critical to the operation of that department. You can't be in a position where you tell one yes and you tell the other one no. You can't.
Why? I'm quite
Yeah,
serious, because at
that's-
Shell, that's exactly what they did.
Well, I don't know why, or how, or
So
why
why?
Shell did it, but that's what we have to assess. We have, the attorneys have some concerns about the equitableness of doing something like that, allowing one to go and not allowing another to go. That's part of what we're trying to work through. Understand, we don't have a problem with this. We think it's a good idea, but there's got to be a mechanism to do it that it actually saves the county money. If it's not going to save the county money, I don't see the value in doing it.
Well, having sat here when we did the early outs the last go-round, well, about 3 or 4 of them actually in different windows, but, those decisions saved the county money as far as the wages and the salaries of the people that they were hiring. I don't think we ever anticipated quite what the liability of those people that left was.
Well, that was a much different situation, because in that situation, the early incentive was a higher retirement payment.
Right.
A percentage on their retirement for a period of years. Listen, and we rehired people.
Right.
This is a much better way and a much cleaner way to do it, because you're not changing the retirement. But and certainly, even if you fill the position, if you filled it immediately, you're going to bring somebody in at level 1 or level 2, where these people are at level 6. You're going to save some portion of the salary for a period of years. But what you have to do is, I think you have to look at that in terms of the salary that the person's making. You have to look at it and determine how much you're actually saving in terms of benefits. Because, for example, you could hire somebody in, someone could leave who's under defined contribution, you could hire who's single, and their replacement could be somebody who's under defined contribution but has a family. Now, all of a sudden, your cost for health insurance goes from $4,000 to $12,000. And you might only save money for 6 months, or might not save any money. These are all things we're trying to evaluate. We want to make sure this is ironclad, and we also want to make sure that it's fair and that it's equitable and everybody can take advantage of it. But I think the court's idea of a flat dollar amount, some kind of a percentage or a dollar amount as an incentive to go, is a good way to go. And in Carol's case, the district court, it's not a problem. They're willing to leave the position open, so we know we're going to save that money. I'm as concerned, though, for example, if we instituted this program and Dean came to me and said, I'm taking the money, I'm going.
I think he wants to.
After this year, touche.
You said he's getting a
That
little,
won't
he
be a
said he's getting a little feisty, but you see my point. I mean, in critical positions, I can't be without that person.
Yeah.
And I just have to make sure that Dean then doesn't have a claim against us because we let one do it and we said to another, no, you cannot. So those are the things we have to kind of work through, and we're working on that. We've been talking about it and working on it. We'll have an analysis for you at RMA.
Okay.
Anything else? Remember, we've got to be all done with this by the 15th of November.
Huh?
I'm going deer hunting.
Oh, Jesus. We'll get it done. All right.
And we don't have to be here tomorrow night.
No, tomorrow night, then I guess it's canceled
Canceled.
while we work on this.
So-
Motion to adjourn.
So, you really want to?
Yeah.
I didn't get a second, but I got some nodding heads.
I'll second it.
Okay,
I'll support.
meeting adjourned. Hey, I was gonna leave at 8 o'clock, you don't have to.
No, you were totally fine. No, and I had told him right away.